my first response to that is, I can teach you. I can teach you how to touch the ground. You have to move more on the motorcycle. You've got to have greater balance. Honestly, I think women end up actually being better and more skilled riders. Sorry, boys. Better and skilled riders than most men simply because they do have to learn those balance techniques. Balance is a huge element of being able to ride effectively. So at Clear Moto, I actually teach 5 foundational skills. It's vision, balance, clutch, throttle, and braking control. Vision and balance are a married couple, and so they are at the absolute top of that pyramid. They are so important. So if you feel like, I just can't, all these bikes are so tall, I don't know how to do it, there are techniques. Welcome to Two Track and Tarmac, a podcast dedicated to the adventure motorcycle rider, the rider that frequents both the street and the trails, on a quest to answer the burning question, I wonder where that road goes. I'm your host, Cassie Meyer. I own and operate Clear Moto motorcycle rider training. I've been a professional coach since 2019. My goal with this podcast is to give a female's perspective on the adventure riding segment, the motorcycle community, and the industry. With that being said, the views and opinions expressed on Two Track and Tarmac are those of the talent and guests alone and may not necessarily reflect the official policy or opinions of any organization. The content provided in this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. We will discuss motorcycle-related topics, which may include riding suggestions and techniques. Two Track and Tarmac is not responsible for any injuries, damages, or losses that you may experience when acting on your own. In this episode, I'm going to cover the struggles that I see women have managing the size, height, and weight of adventure motorcycles. Now, I don't think that it's necessarily a women's problem. I think this is anybody's problem. What happens is you have this intersection of person's size and the size of the motorcycle. They don't always add up, and that can be challenging. I also want to discuss what I mean by managing an adventure motorcycle. So when I'm talking about managing an adventure motorcycle, sure, when you have a street motorcycle, you kind of have to manage that a little bit, but you're not planning on dropping or having to pick it up. Now, it happens, no doubt, but with an adventure motorcycle, that's kind of the game. You're going to drop it a lot, and being able to manage that motorcycle is critical in choosing what motorcycle is going to work well for you. When it comes to you, there's going to be 3 key factors that I want to point out. The first one is going to be your leg length. Second is going to be your overall strength. And the last one is just going to be old injuries or physical limitations. When considering leg length, I want you to think more about your inseam. Your overall height isn't really going to determine whether or not you feel comfortable putting 1 foot or 2 feet down when you're sitting on a motorcycle. That inseam is the part that you really need to pay attention to. For example, I stand at 5 feet 4 inches. My inseam is 28 inches. My motorcycle's seat height is 32 inches, which means that I never get to put both feet down. That is something that I have learned how to do, and I feel very comfortable managing. Now, in your case, you might not feel that same kind of comfort. You might want to have more of your foot on the ground, or you want to have both feet on the ground. In that case, you're going to look for a motorcycle that has a seat height that matches your inseam. Now, the other part about that is you want to make sure that you have a seat that is either going to be narrower or wider. The wider the seat is, the more of your inseam it is going to take up. The narrower the seat is, the less of your inseam it is going to take up. So if you think about standing kind of in a sumo squat, When you try to spread your legs further apart, your butt ends up getting closer and closer to the ground. That's like sitting on that wide seat, meaning you need to have a lower seat height if you're going to have a wide seat. The narrower the seat is, the taller that seat height can become when your legs feel straight, and it still might give you that flat-footedness that you're looking for. So you're going to have to make a decision about that leg length and figuring out what you want for that seat height. Ultimately, being able to put your foot down or both feet down is going to give you some extra stability in preventing the motorcycle from tipping over. So the greater that ratio is between your inseam to the seat height, the greater the chances of you having a tip over, especially off-road where the terrain changes all the time. And when you go reaching and there's an extra inch away from the bottom of your foot and you need to reach for it, that can put you in that point of no return when that motorcycle starts to tip over. Now again, managing the motorcycle, sure, leg length, making sure you don't tip it over, but when you do tip it over, you're gonna have to be able to lift it up, which is gonna lead me into the strength portion of how you and your body needs to manage adventure riding. The strength portion of managing your adventure motorcycle, I think, comes in two parts. So one part is the actual riding portion. So it should almost be effortless to be able to maneuver your motorcycle. However, when you are brand new, you're gonna need to build up that strength, that muscle memory. But also, when you ride stuff that's really hard, more challenging terrain, you are going to be working. You're going to be balancing more. You're going to be moving those handlebars around more. You're going to be physically exerting yourself on a more challenging terrain. So you have to have the strength for that. So the second portion of the strength element is picking up the motorcycle once it's fallen over. So for me, I have a little test, and that is I have to be able to pick up my motorcycle by myself. Now, in certain situations, I'm going to ask for help, but on relatively flat ground, just kind of as a baseline, I have to be able to pick up that motorcycle by myself. So a perfect example for strength and managing your adventure motorcycle and the motorcycle that you're going to pick for yourself. I had a Desert X, a Ducati Desert X at one point, as well as an R1250 GS. I loved my Ducati Desert X. It rode beautifully. It looked gorgeous. I just loved it until it fell over. So when it fell over, lifting that motorcycle was so challenging for me by myself. My R1250 GS weighs more. It's 550 pounds curb weight. So it weighs more than that because I've got a bunch of stuff on it. The Desert X was 490 pounds. And of course I had things on it as well. So it weighed a little bit more. But generally speaking, we've got 550 pounds here, 490 pounds here. You would think the weight alone, I should be able to, pick up the Ducati with no problem because there's an additional 60 pounds here on the BMW. The problem was, it was a taller motorcycle, so I ran out of leverage because I'm only 5'4", so that is where height comes into play. So I ran out of leverage. The other thing that was hard was that it fell completely flat, and that was really challenging for me to be able to get underneath it, and it held its weight in a funny way in comparison to the BMW. So lifting it was so much more challenging by myself. The GS, because it's got those boxer engines, it doesn't fall totally flat. It's a little bit shorter than the Desert X was. It's just easier for me to pick up the 1250, even though it's 550 pounds, 60 pounds heavier than the Desert X. Ultimately, I had to make a decision about my management of strength. I ended up getting rid of the Desert X solely because I was not able to pick it up by myself enough. I didn't have the strength. I didn't have the body type that was going to allow for that kind of height because the bike was so much taller. So I got rid of it. I made that choice. I could not manage that motorcycle in that element. Everything else was great, but it just didn't pass my test. So I'm now sticking it out with my BMW R1250 GS, which of course I also adore that motorcycle. So strength is really, really important. Getting into the gym is really important. Building that strength. Sure, getting out and riding is where you're really gonna build it, but you need to have that base. Lifting your motorcycle is a full body experience. If you lack some strength, you're gonna end up having an injury. I've seen it. I've seen people blow out their backs, blow out their knees because they simply just didn't have the strength. There is a technique involved in lifting up a motorcycle so that you can protect yourself. But again, if you don't have the physical strength to protect those body parts, you could still have injury. Now, there have been times in my life where I fall off of the wagon and I'm not going to the gym as often. I can absolutely see and feel a difference in my riding as well as picking up my motorcycle. I struggle to pick up my motorcycle and my baseline drops when I'm not going to the gym frequently. So that overall strength for you, you need to figure out what do you want to manage in your life and with your adventure motorcycle. If getting to the gym frequently is not your thing, or you just don't want to do it, and maybe you would just prefer lifting a 350-pound motorcycle instead of a 550-pound motorcycle, that's a decision that you need to make for yourself. But strength is a really key element to managing your adventure riding. The last thing that you're going to want to consider when it comes to managing your body type regarding the adventure motorcycle that you want is going to be your old injuries and your physical limitations. What I mean by that is, let's say you've had an injury to your shoulder, and that is going to limit your range of motion. And so if you need to twist in a certain way, or maybe when the handlebars move quickly, that might hurt your shoulder or it agitates it, you need to keep that in mind. You might want a lighter weight motorcycle or a smaller motorcycle so that you don't end up agitating that old injury. When it comes to physical limitations, if you can't turn, I've had students, for example, who've had parts of their vertebrae fused, and it limits their ability to rotate. Rotating your body so that you can make a tight, slow counterbalance turn is really important. However, it doesn't mean that you cannot ride a motorcycle. It just means that you need to manage that part of it. Some motorcycles are going to lend themselves to your limitations better than others. The only way that you're going to be able to determine that is if you can get out and ride them. Also, if you can get in with a professional coach who's really, really knowledgeable in what the motorcycle needs and what you need to do in order to get the bike to maneuver properly, is going to help you tremendously. Sometimes you'll see stuff out on the internet that just says you can only turn if you do this with your body. Well, if you're limited and you can't twist, then that might feel like that's the end of the road for you. And it's not, because there are a lot of different ways that you can get that bike to do what you need it to do. Again, there are going to be some motorcycles out there that lend themselves better to what you need. For example, I'm going to go back to that Desert X and the R1250 GS. The 1250 GS turns so much better in a tight circle than that Desert X ever could have. And I'm the same rider on both motorcycles. I could not get the Desert X to turn the way the 1250 GS does. So again, some motorcycles are just going to be better equipped for what it is that you need for your body. So again, just a real quick recap of that intersection between the motorcycle and your body type and things you need to consider managing so that you can be set up for success and ride the motorcycle that is best for you. You want to consider your leg length, specifically your inseam, and then you want to figure out how close can you get that inseam to the seat height. Consider the width of that seat height so that you can feel as confident as possible being able to touch the ground with one or both feet, whichever you choose. You also, of course, want to consider your strength. How much can you handle? How much can you lift? Do you want a lighter weight motorcycle? Do you want a heavier weight motorcycle? How much do you want to be in the gym? And of course, that strength is going to help protect you from possible injury. And then, of course, injuries, old injuries and physical limitations. So finding a motorcycle that is going to be better adapted to what it is that you need based on your physical ability. Now, let me dive into the adventure motorcycles. There are a ton of options out there. So you range anywhere from dual sports all the way up to these heavyweights. Now, my R1250 GS is considered a heavyweight. Now, is it the heaviest adventure motorcycle out there right now? No, actually, it's not. But then there's dual sports, and those are going to be on the smaller side. Now, those can get big too, but you're generally going to range anywhere from about 300 to 600 pounds and anywhere in between. Adventure motorcycles by design are tall. And the reason that they are tall is because they need to have the ground clearance. The closer that the belly of the motorcycle is to the ground, the greater the chances of bottoming out and striking the bottom of that motorcycle. A lot of adventure motorcycles actually come with what's called a skid plate, and that's a piece of metal that protects the soft underbelly of your motorcycle. Even on some of these tall motorcycles, you can see that their skid plate is all marred up from rocks getting kicked up from the front tire or from going down really rugged terrain and actually scraping the skid plate. So adventure bikes are tall so that they can have that clearance. What's happening, however, is adventure motorcycles are getting taller and taller and taller when people aren't. So it's making some of these adventure motorcycles kind of fall out of the grasp of a lot of women. And so I have students who come to me or new riders that come to me and they say, I want to get into adventure riding, but I can't touch the ground. So my first response to that is, I can teach you. I can teach you how to touch the ground. You have to move more on the motorcycle. You've got to have greater balance. Honestly, I think women end up actually being better and more skilled riders, sorry boys, better and skilled riders than most men simply because they do have to learn those balance techniques. Balance is a huge element of being able to ride effectively. So at Clear Moto, I actually teach 5 foundational skills. It's vision, balance, clutch, throttle, and braking control. Vision and balance are a married couple. And so they are at the absolute top of that pyramid. They are so, so important. So if you feel like, I just can't, all these bikes are so tall, I don't know how to do it, there are techniques. However, that doesn't mean that you have to learn that technique. If you want to have a motorcycle that is lower, there are plenty of options out there. When it comes to actually picking an adventure motorcycle that's going to fit you and the things that you want to manage based on your leg length, your strength, and old injuries or physical limitations, you've got to range from the dual sports all the way up to the heavyweight adventure motorcycles. Adventure motorcycles are this blend between being able to ride on-road and being able to ride off-road. Now, if you have a spectrum and you have off-road and you have on-road on either ends, you cannot have a motorcycle that has both ends ticked. You can only be somewhere once in that line. For example, you're going to have a bike that's either really good on pavement and okay off-road, or you're going to have a bike that's really good off-road and okay on pavement. For example, there are some dual sports that are really off-road oriented and they're kind of garbage on pavement. They can make it on pavement and they have lights and they're legal to be on paved roads, but they're not great for it. But they're awesome out in the dirt. But then you have some that are really great as Street bikes, or some people even just use them as commuters because they're more comfortable because of the ergonomics, and they're okay for off-road. You're not going to want to take them off-road real hard. Then maybe the travel suspension isn't all that great. Again, you fall somewhere in that spectrum. So you kind of need to figure out what kind of motorcycle you want. The ones that are a little bit more street oriented are typically going to have lower seat heights. Ones that are more off-road oriented are usually going to have a taller seat height, and that's because they need that travel or that ground clearance. So that puts some women in this sticky situation of, oh, I really want to have that really off-road oriented motorcycle, but it's so damn tall. There's a couple options for you. You can you can do lowering links on it, and you can actually lower the suspension of the motorcycle. Now, when you lower the suspension of the motorcycle, you do decrease that travel distance again, but if it makes you feel more comfortable and you're not going to drop it as much, then who cares? Just put a skid plate on it and you'll be perfectly fine. Some manufacturers will also offer that motorcycle in a factory lowered option, so you don't have to mess with actually getting in there and changing out the suspension. The last thing that you can do, and it's not always an option, but you can sometimes get a different type of seat. So you can get like a lowered seat, so they usually look a little bit scooped out or dished out, so it just gives you a little bit more. For example, again, when I had my Desert X, it was a tall motorcycle. I spent, because it costs me money because it was not a factory option, I spent the money to get a different seat and to have the suspension lowered. It gave me just a little over an inch, but that inch made a huge difference, because for those of you who have experienced it, sometimes when you reach out your foot and you have just an inch more where you have to reach, that puts you into that point of no return, and you tip too far over and you just can't save the motorcycle, and then you end up falling over at a stop because it was just an inch too far. So an inch can make all the difference. So you can figure out kind of where you want to fit on that spectrum, as far as, do you want it to be more on-road oriented, do you want it to be more off-road oriented, and then figuring out what can you do to the motorcycle to make it fit your body type. Now that you have a better understanding of your body type and the things that you're willing to manage, and then adventure motorcycles and picking one that is going to fit you really well, what are you going to do with all of this? I am, of course, going to encourage you to get some training and professional training. Having a really sound coach is going to help you tremendously. So regardless of whether you're the kind of person who wants to start small and just get your toes wet, or you're the kind of person who wants to jump headfirst into something, if you have a solid coach, they are going to meet you where you are, and they're going to give you the solid foundation that is going to help boost your confidence, your proficiency, and your control. That's what Clearmoto does. That's what we work on every single lesson, is helping to increase your confidence, your proficiency, and your control, which of course is going to help you manage some of your body type on the adventure motorcycle that you have chosen for yourself. The key things that you're really going to want to learn in order to manage something like shorter legs on a taller motorcycle is going to be things like balance. Balance is not something that often gets a lot of attention. In my opinion, I think it's tremendously helpful. Again, I have a 28-inch inseam. My seat height is 32 inches, which means I am never flat-footed. So I absolutely have to be balanced on my motorcycle, keep my motorcycle balanced to prevent tip overs. Now, if it's a perfectly beautiful day and I don't have a gust of wind, then that's simple. But when I have that gust of wind and I don't have good balance, boom, over you go. So building that balance is really, really key. And then of course there's techniques that help with managing, again, your body type to the adventure motorcycle that you have chosen for yourself. What is most important is starting where you are. If you're starting at the very, very beginning, then start at the very beginning. You can't skip ahead. And if you're starting in the middle, let's say you already have some motorcycle experience, but you're switching over to adventure, then start where you are. You've got those basics, but now you're switching over to the wibble wobbles of dirt. And of course, if you've been riding dirt, but you're just like, I just don't feel confident on this new motorcycle that I just got for myself. Maybe it's taller, maybe it's bigger. Go get some training with that motorcycle. Get comfortable with that bike as well. Regarding this episode, I would love to hear your experience with maybe where you have run into some problems with your body type compared to the adventure motorcycles that are available to you, or maybe something that you've overcome and you figured out how to crack that nut. I would love to hear your stories. This is, of course, always open to both men and women because I don't think this is only a ladies' problem. I think this is a body type to motorcycle availability problem in the adventure riding segment. So if you're short specifically, I think that we run into a lot of problems because these things are so dang tall. So please throw that down in the comments. I absolutely love hearing from you. Thank you so much for listening to Two Track and Tarmac, my podcast dedicated to you, the adventure motorcycle rider. If you are enjoying this podcast, please consider subscribing and sharing it with your friends. If you would like to see more motorcycle content, specifically training, tutorials, and my monthly newsletter, you can subscribe to the Clear Moto Patreon page. Your support through both the podcast and Patreon is going to help me continue to do what it is that I adore doing, which is sharing my motorcycle knowledge with you. You can find links to Patreon down in the show notes below. Thank you again so much for listening to Two Track and Tarmac. I look forward to seeing you in the next one.